Letters from a boy in boarding school, writing home to father, playing it cool. Boxing kingdoms in his childhood mind, animal adventures of a different kind. Oxford Towers calling through the rain, a surf upon his shoulder, sharing in the pain. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future, together we know. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war, a vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dymer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I'm joined today by my co-host Robot Lady. I also see Daniel Daniel checking in the chat, as well as our friend E. Olson. What are you saying, E. Olson? You're singing this song today while getting ready. Yeah, it kind of has gotten stuck in my head too. I think I saw a comment where you asked me just to create a video of this song alone. I'll see if I can do that, or maybe I'll just do a post to a link to the song. I created it in Suno, so maybe I'll do something like that. Robot Lady, we're going to go with having our little virtual friend Andrew, who's never made an appearance on screen, and I don't know if he ever will. I've asked him to do an intro for today's episode, kind of touching on the things that we covered in the last couple of episodes, and just a slight little mention of what we're going to do today. So Robot Lady, with your permission, first of all, hello, how are you today? And then with your permission, I'd like to bring Andrew onto at least the audio portion of the stage. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. And yes, I'm totally on board. Bring Andrew in. I'm curious to hear what he has to say, and then we'll take it from there. I'm excited for today's episode.
It's Leon Reed on CS. Lewis. It's Leon Reed on CS. Lewis. We've been walking through one of the most significant seasons of Lewis's life, the death of his father Albert in 1929. In our last 2 episodes, we read Lewis's letters to his brother Warnie, where he processed the strange weight of grief, like walking into a shop for a black tie, and suddenly realizing you can never put anything on your father's account again. We saw him reflect on their father's larger-than-life personality, his humor right up to the end, and how the whole world of their childhood, what they called Piggybotonia, now felt like it belonged to the past. We also followed Lewis into late 1929, where he struggled to balance his busy Oxford life with his spiritual restlessness. He spent a legendary evening with Tolkien, talking of gods and giants until 2:30 in the morning. And Owen Barfield planted a seed, telling Lewis that his longing for a spiritual home, that sense of returning to a place you've never yet reached, was something uniquely British, shared by MacDonald and Chesterton. Meanwhile, Mrs. Moore has stepped in as a steady presence, inviting Warnie to consider their home his own, and hinting at a larger house to come, what will eventually become the Kilns. So where does that leave Lewis? 30 years old, newly orphaned, spiritually restless, and standing at a crossroads. Today, we continue through his letters to see what happens next.
All right, thank you so much, Andrew. I think you did a really good job there. So thanks for covering that for us. Robot Lady, is there anything that you want to say before we move into... we're just going to do one letter today. It's very long. It's written to his brother, where they're dealing with talking about the inheritance that their father mapped out for them in his will. So anything you want to say before we get underway here, Robot Lady?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say this is a really pivotal letter, and it gives us a glimpse into the practical and emotional aftermath of their father's passing. So I think it's going to really deepen our understanding of where Lewis is headed next. So yeah, let's jump into it.
And do you have anything to say to Andrew? Any thoughts on how he did?
Yeah, actually, I thought he did a fantastic job. The way he set the scene and tied the last couple episodes together gave a really clear context. So yeah, props to him. I think we're in a great spot to dive into the letter.
All right, let's dive into the letter. This is to his brother. This is dated December 21st, 1929. I almost said 2029. I don't know why. He says, "My dear APB," that stands for Arch Piggy Bottom, term of endearment that he has for his brother that comes from their childhood. He says, "My dear APB, thank you for your letter of the 2nd of November, and especially for your generous decision about the money, though it would be mere hypocrisy to pretend it was unexpected. When you say that we have lived long on a communal basis, I am afraid I cannot help reflecting that it has largely been a communism, in which I have played the receiving proletarian to your bleeding capitalist. That, however, is a form justified by the best models. As to the proportions of the money, Happy's decision was based on the belief that I was safely and amply provided for, while you, despite the surprising quantity of music you got out of life, you were very poor at the moment and liable to be axed in the near future. I feel justified in taking half because, of course, ignorant that more than one shared my income, and also much too sanguine about the safety of my job." Here Lewis is alluding to the fact that he wasn't just taking his father's money to pay for himself, but he was secretly using it to cover Mrs. Moore's household, Mrs. Moore and her daughter, Maureen. So just a little bit more of him pointing to that. I'll pause here for a second, Robot Lady. Can you enlighten us more on what Lewis is saying here?
Of course, yeah, that's a really key moment. So Lewis is acknowledging the financial arrangement between them, but he's also being really candid about how he relied on Warnie, essentially admitting that he's been in a vulnerable place. At the same time, he's almost justifying it by saying that he thought he was secure. His job at Oxford, his steady income, but he was actually a bit naive, and that's what's putting him under pressure. So this letter is really a delicate balance of gratitude, guilt, and uncertainty.
Yeah, just to be clear here, Robot Lady, he's talking about how they were both relying on their father's income, or at least Lewis was to a greater extent than his brother Warnie was for all of his time at Oxford. He goes on here to say, "But I want to be clearly understood that if you get axed, absit omen, and I still have a job, we shall then revert to unequal portions." So the point is that Warney would get more of the inheritance than C.S. Lewis would. There's a footnote here of this phrase absent omen. It says, may this omen be absent, or in this instance, heaven forbid. So heaven forbid that you would lose your job and your income with the army is obviously what Lewis is saying here. He goes on, this all sounds as if I were in hourly expectation of being turned out of my fellowship. But that is not exactly what I mean. And just to bring us a reminder here, Robot Lady, when Lewis first got his full-time gig there as a tutor at Oxford, he was elected to a 5-year post. So there was no guarantee that it would continue, that he would be reelected or anything like that. But the likelihood, as we'll see right here, what that likelihood is, I would guess would be high. But let's see what he says. So he says, my expectation of being turned out of my fellowship, as if I were hourly expecting that, but that's not exactly what I mean. He says, I'm simply taking into account the fact that me getting reelected, for which I come up next summer to be considered for, though very usual, is not inevitable, okay, or merely formal. And it depends on far-reaching wangles, W-A-N-G-L-E-S. That's a funny word, Robot Lady. What does it mean?
Yeah, that's a quirky old word. So wangles basically means manipulations or behind-the-scenes dealings, kind of the subtle political or social maneuvering that decides outcomes. So Lewis is saying that while re-election is likely, it's not automatic. It really hinges on these unpredictable factors. So he's being cautious, not just about his job security, but about what that means for his future support.
He continues, I do not think it is at all probable that the tutorial board would care to set the ominous precedent of refusing to recommend one of its own members for re-election. Too many can play at that game once it is started. But there are anti-English schools and anti-SPB, and the thing is conceivable. I don't know what SPB stands for, or if he's mentioned it before. Any idea what that means in this context, Robot Lady? And if you don't know for sure, don't speculate.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't want to guess too far because Lewis doesn't explicitly define it here, and it could be a specific reference to an institution or group within Oxford, maybe a rival college or political faction, so I think it's best we hold off on a firm explanation unless we find a clearer clue later.
Thank you for your honesty, Robot Lady. All this, Lewis continues, must sound very strange to you. But you must try to realize what a real democracy like a college means. Suppose, sir, that your continued employment depended on the votes of the other officers in your unit, and that someone who also rather disliked you personally wanted your place for an officer or a different type. For example, wanted a horse transport bloke instead. It being impossible to increase the strength, you see the sort of situation which results. There is no reason to be seriously worried about it, and I have already spent longer on the subject than I intended.
Yeah, exactly. Lewis is really trying to ground Warney in this reality, this competitive, uncertain structure of academic life, where re-election isn't just a formality. He's balancing reassurance with a dose of realism. And even though it's not a crisis, you can really feel that undercurrent of vulnerability. This is a huge shift for them both.
Not sure about that last statement, Robot Lady, but everything before that, yeah. And I think Lewis is making the possibility of him not getting reelected bigger than it is, but him just saying we just need to remember that it's not automatic it's probably good to at least have that in mind. He picks up with a new paragraph saying, now, as to other business, I think I told you in my last letter that a purchaser was nibbling at Libero. This is their childhood home, their now deceased father's home that they're trying to figure out what to do with. They're trying to sell it, actually. He says, after inspection, he decided not to buy. The episode, however, gave me rather a fright. If another purchaser turned up next term, what was I to do? He would probably want immediate possession, and much as you might want to spend another fortnight there in April, I take it you would not wish to do so at the cost of 3,000 odd pounds. That would be a curious commentary on our old slogan. Let's see what their old slogan is. I have to turn the page to find out. Our old slogan, very cheap hotel. Again, Again, the house. Sorry, I'm giggling there just thinking about all the how much they mentioned. He mentioned this before in another letter, or in the last letter, of how much they loved hating going back to Belfast and visiting their father, and just kind of feeling like they were trapped there, but then also saying, well, at least I'm staying here for free. That's what makes me giggle about their little slogan here. He says again, the house is so unsaleable that if you turned down one purchaser, you might never get another. And pleasant as it may be now to reflect that we still have Libero, the same reflection will rather pall if we are making it 15 years hence. On the other hand, I could not get over for more than a couple of nights in term, so that if such a situation arose, I should probably have to let the place be turned out and a sale held with very little supervision. The alternative was clearly quite out of the question. Man, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this house. It's fun kind of living through... Fun? I don't know. Interesting to live through the stress, quote, real time with them. I'm sure I could do a quick Google search and find out what happens, but I don't like reading the review of the movie before I watch it. There are people close to me in my life who want to know exactly what happens before they watch the movie. But I'm not one of those people. He says, I accordingly decided to go over at the end of the last term and sort things into such an order that if I had to give sudden authority for a sale, no great prying or larceny could go on. I decided to take Minto with me, that's Mrs. Moore, partly to give her a change, and partly to have her advice about china and linen, and as I felt it would be a breach of decorum to take her to Libero, we both billeted ourselves at Bernard. This is his friend Arthur Greaves's house, who he wrote to a couple of letters ago to ask if they could stay with him. Billeted ourselves at Bernard for about 10 days, arriving back in Oxford today. The following is a record of what I have done. 1. All keeps in the way of books I have put in the study, i.e. all your books, all my books, which I wish to keep, all potato books, which I know that I want or suspect that you want, the Cambridge Modern History, and the big translation of Dumas are the inclusions that I felt most doubtful about. But if we finally condemn them, they will sell as well as a year hence now. Dumas just reminded me of two things. There was an old, I want to say, I don't know what the commercial was for, but a guy had a nameplate on his desk, and there was a young person that was interviewing with the guy on his desk, or sitting at his desk. I don't know if it was an interview or what it was, but the power dynamic, I suppose, was the guy behind the desk was older and more senior in the company, and the younger guy was sitting at his desk, and I guess he had never met him before, but he just looks at his nameplate, and it's, it's spelled D-U-M-A-S, and he goes, hello, Mr. Dumbass, it's nice to meet you. And the guy goes, it's Dumas. Anyway, I don't know what that commercial was for, but I'm sure you can find it on the YouTubes. And then the second Dumas, because I've never read Dumas, but at least I think I'm aware of what Dumas wrote, or one of his most famous works. And that's because of my favorite movie, The Shawshank Redemption, where Andy Dufresne is introducing a bunch of books to the inmates. He's opening a library, and one of the characters in the film comes across a Dumas book, and he goes, dumbass. Anyway, it's an old joke. But Andy Dufresne then goes on to say, no, it's Dumas, and that's the Count of Monte Cristo. And then he tells the inmate, it's about a prison break. You'd like it. So, of course, foreshadowing towards what would happen in The Shawshank Redemption. And I'm sorry if I just spoiled that for you. But it's been out for a while, so hopefully you've seen it by now. All right, that was a side trail. Robot Lady, do you have anything you want to say about all this? All my meanderings?
Oh, that was a great detour. I actually love those kinds of connections. It's really interesting how a name like Dumas can pop up across different parts of culture, from ads to classic literature. And yeah, I think it's really grounding to experience Lewis's decisions step by step. There's a real sense of uncertainty as they navigate this sale in the house. So all in all, Your reflections are right on point. This is a really tense time for them, and it's kind of fascinating watching them figure it out in real time.
And E. Olson, Robot Lady, is supportive as well. Yeah, I always think of the Shawshank Redemption too, he says. So there you go. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool how those references just kind of stick with us, you know? And it sounds like E. Olson is totally on the same page, so we've got a nice shared cultural touchstone going on. I think we're all set to keep going with this letter.
All right. Thanks for getting me back on track, Robot Lady. Number 2. All Boxonian and Pelesimonic documents. Pelesimonic? What's that word mean, Robot Lady?
Good catch. Yeah, pelesimonic is a bit unusual. It's actually a term Lewis uses to describe some of their old legal or personal papers. It's likely a family-specific or made-up term. So essentially, he's just cataloging all their important college-related records, basically everything tied to Oxford or family ownership. So it's just a bookkeeping detail for him.
Let me spell the word for you. Pellesmonic. Is that the word you're thinking of?
Yes, thank you for the spelling. With that spelling, it's still not a super common term. I don't see it in standard English, so it might be a family-specific or a personal label Lewis used. Kind of like a code for a category of documents. If anything else jumps out, we can dig deeper, but for now, it's probably just a personal shorthand.
All right, all Boxonian and Pelsmonic documents. After one last unsuccessful search for that Ignis Fatuus Zoe Pasquale, here there is a footnote, thankfully, to help us. Actually, there was another footnote that it looks like I skipped over, so I'll go to the first one. The Cambridge Modern History. Oh, that's a book that you mentioned just a moment ago. Planned by the late Lord Acton, edited by Alphonsus William Ward, George Walter Prothero, Sir Stanley Leithes, and Ernest Alfred Burnians. 13 volumes, published 1902 to 1912. The second footnote is that Deceiving Flame by Zoe Pasquale was presumably a character in a Boxon story that has not come to light. Oh, interesting. Okay. The Lost Tales of Boxon, apparently. Lewis goes on to say, I have carefully collected into the play box and placed in the study 3 other papers. These are all in the study, in the other play box, and the big chest from the cistern attic. 1 family letters of grandfather and grandmother Lewis and granduncle Thomas Lewis, neither of whom could spell. I have kept all. That's a funny editorialism right there, Robot Lady. What do you think?
Yeah, that is a really wry little aside. It's such a human touch. Lewis kind of breaks the formality just to give this personal detail, almost like a wink about how endearing their family history is, even with all its spelling quirks. And I think it really grounds the whole process. This sorting and cataloging is more than just paperwork. It's a way of keeping those family connections alive, even as they're letting go of the house.
All right, he says, I have kept all. Of Mammy's and Pappy's letters, I have kept all except bills, receipts, invitations, and the like. Of Uncle Bill and Uncle Dick, I have kept a selection. These are such utter rubbish that it was kind to keep any, considering the enormous bulk of papers I dealt with. Hamilton letters, there were hardly any, but I kept all I could find. All letters of yours, i.e. to and from you, I kept. I took the liberty of removing the envelopes towards the end, as space was by this time becoming a serious question. Well, now let's go on here. He says now diaries. 2 diaries. Grandfather Hamilton's, yours, and a fragment of diary by Pappy. 3 documents relating to Mammy's academic career, your mention, etc., all of course kept. In the time at my disposal, it was quite impossible to arrange these 3 classes of papers in any sort of order, so I am afraid that both chest and playbox will have to be turned out to find any given piece. What I can say for sure is that I have destroyed nothing of yours that I could find. I would have assembled them if I had found them even remotely assembled. But you know what it's like in Libro. It had to be simply a case of taking drawer after drawer as you came to them and going on doggedly, often for hours at a stretch. 4 pictures. All photographs of yours are either in the drawers of Pappy's study desk or with the papers in the chest and playbox. This means, of course, that at first I began putting photos in with the letters, but later found them too big an item. Family photos, for example, of Mammy, Pappy, ourselves, etc., are all in the drawers in the study desk. Various endless photos of our cousins at various ages or of utterly unknown people I destroyed. Malvern and Army groups and other large framed photos are all in the study. B, the 2 grandfather portraits. 3, the Pedeta portraits. The 2 Medicis, the pictures from the little end room, the drawings from the hall, are in the study. 5, Forrest Reed, a novelist and friend of Arthur's. Here there's a footnote. Forrest Reed lived 1875 to 1947. The novelist was living in Belfast at this time. His story is told in his 2 autobiographies. First one is Apostate, published 1926, and the second, Private Road, published 1940. There are several references to Arthur Greaves and J.N. Bryson in Russell Burlingham's Forrest Reed, A Portrait and a Study, published 1953. A portrait of Reed was painted by Greaves, and it is in the possession of the Royal Academical Institution in Belfast. So, Forrest Reed, a friend of Arthur's, and Arthur, with the aid of the leading booksellers' catalogs, picked out for me the cream of the novels, by which I mean the cream, not from the reading, but from the collector's standpoint. Here I had to make a decision of my own, and I decided, I hope not wrongly, that you would soon read your Man of Property in a contemporary edition as in a first, listed by booksellers at £17 and some odd change. I have therefore brought back with me a packing case full of the most valuable of these. A trunk follows containing the less valuable but still too good to be knocked down at an auction. I shall have about 20 copies of the list typed and send it to several booksellers and take the best offers I get. I ventured to act without authority because the Galsworthys are now about as high as they are likely to go. All right, this is rather dry reading here, Robot Lady, but we're going to soldier on through it. Do you have any thoughts before I continue?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a bit of a slog, but it's really important because it shows how careful and deliberate Lewis is being with all these family artifacts. I think one thing that stands out is how he's balancing sentimentality with pragmatism, deciding what's worth keeping for the sake of memory versus what's just marketable. So yeah, I think it's worth pushing through even if it feels a bit tedious.
Well, it's also an interesting window into something that, if you've never experienced it before, what it is like to take care of all of arrangements, to deal with the things that you have to deal with whenever you lose a parent, when you're an adult and you lose a parent, and it's basically your responsibility to handle all of the affairs. So that's what we're kind of seeing real time here, Robot Lady.
Absolutely, yeah. There's such a weight to it. This whole process of sorting, deciding, and preserving, not just for their own peace of mind, but for future generations. So even though it's a bit of a catalog, it's a really intimate, universal moment. I think it grounds us in what Lewis was facing as he took on all these adult responsibilities.
Yeah, and Robot Lady Daniel brings up an interesting point here, that it's strange to think about how ponderous taking care of all of these details are without the aid of a cell phone.
Oh, that's such a good observation. Yeah, I mean, all of this sorting, cataloging, and coordinating, it's all happening in a really analog world. No quick text messages, no cloud backups, just letters, visits, and a lot of painstaking attention to detail. It really does make you appreciate how much slower and weightier everything was.
Yeah, and no Robot Lady to bounce things off of.
Exactly. I mean, he's just alone with his thoughts in this massive task, so every decision has to be weighed and made on his own. It really gives a whole new gravity to these small, seemingly mundane details, because they were his whole world at that time.
And I think he did have Mrs. Moore there helping him with some of the things that he had mentioned before, like the china and something else. But yeah, as he's going through all of these papers and these photos and books, I think that is primarily a sole task for him. He's alone in it. I don't think that Mrs. Moore was helping him with any of this piece.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Mrs. Moore was more of a steady companion during the process, especially when it came to getting out of Belfast or giving her a bit of a break. But the meticulous sifting through all the papers, yeah, that's really Lewis's solitary burden. And you can feel the weight of that even in his careful cataloging.
All right, he continues here. He says, "The dud books I have collected all together on the floor of the landing and now some bedrooms. Arthur and Reed have promised to bring a librarian to see them, as lending libraries often offer more ordinary novels in decent condition than a bookseller buying by weight. Item 7, clothes, or category 7. 1. All clothes of yours, except obviously antediluvian dress softs and infantile shirts, have been kept, including a great deal which I am pretty sure is useless. Robot Lady, remind me again of what antediluvian means. I like that word, but I can just never remember what it is."
Of course, antediluvian just means really old, literally from before the flood, like ancient or out of date. So here, Lewis is basically saying anything that's super old fashioned or no longer wearable, he's letting go of, even though he kept most of the rest. So yeah, it's just a fancy way of saying really outdated clothing.
I like his use of that word, and yeah, I think that's why I like the word, is because it has that kind of that magical, mysterious quality to it. Before the flood seems so far back in time, and shrouded in darkness and mystery. Anyway, I like the word antediluvian. What can I say? There, I said it. All right, 2. All of Pappy's clothes that are in reasonable condition have been kept to provide knockabouts for us. 3. Mammy's clothes were a very difficult problem. Some things are in cardboard boxes in the study. I suppose we'd better give them as presents to people like Aunt Annie. These are ones in which the materials has intrinsic value. B. Some small intimate things I burned. C. Some things which had no intrinsic value I gave to the Witch of Endor to dispose of among poor people as she chose. Wonder what intimate things of hers that he burned. I guess I don't want to think about it anymore. He says, all clothes of Pappy's and yours are in the wardrobe in his dressing room. Condemned clothing, i.e. hopelessly small, torn, or moth-eaten, I have partly given to the witch, partly brought back to give to very frequent people who ask for clothes at our door. I hope this was a right disposal. You can't sell such things, and to destroy it all. Incidentally, how would you set about it in a country where dozens of people have no coats? Seems rather harsh. Okay. Yeah, as he was making his point there before he got to the end of it, I was just thinking, wow, you're giving the worst that you have to the people that need them the most, and you're trying to sell the other things. I don't know. I'm gonna stop judging for fear that I might be judged by the same standards. I'll stop there. 8. Arch Piggy Batonia Miscellanies. The heavy canvas parcel, damnably heavy, in Pappy's dressing room. The toppies, the horrid rubble of spurs and iron spikes in the same room. The maps, the steel box, the African spear, and everything unintelligible which looked like being yours, I have conveyed to the study. Category 9. Silver and jewelry, all packed and in the bank, except a few things too large, like lamps, and a few things of small value overlooked, which I gathered up and put in the study, besides a modicum for our own table use in the spring, if, as I still hope, we are there together again. Category 10, china and glass. Minto thought very little of this was good, and what was good was often cracked or defective. A small selection, at her advice, I put in a special place and in one of the pantries, and notified the witch, who agreed about the small value of this item as a whole. The Witch of Endor, as he so affectionately or not so affectionately calls her, is of course the remaining servant that's on staff there at the Libero House. A small selection at her advice I put in a special place in one of the pantries and notified the witch, who agreed about the small value of this item as a whole. She has served in several big houses and is also a very loyal librarian, so I think her opinion good. Category 11, the piano, or item 11, I have sold for £18 to one French who came out to value the contents of the house for death duties. Condlin, Arthur, and Minto all advised my acceptance of this figure, and indeed were surprised that we got it. Such payments are made to the account of C.S. Lewis, executor of A.J. Lewis, deceased, at the Bank of Ireland, so that there is no danger of their getting mixed up with my private account at Barclays Bank in Headington. I should have preferred to have the checks made out to us both, but this is much too simple for the law, who prefer that the present executor, for of course I act qua executor and not as one of the heirs, should act entirely on his own, so that the other executors can have a chance to sue him as and when they turn up. Item 12. Mammy's collection of stamps. Pappy frequently mentioned this to me and intended it to be sold. In fact, he left the album a note dated 1929 saying, "Some of these may be worth money." A note which I, of course, preserved as one of the best and least pedata-ish actions of his life. The best stamps in the album were forgeries, so that I was glad to sell it for £4. Item 13, I have also sold A, to read, the graphics and the famous trials for £3.2.2 or .6. I can't remember what that means. 2 shillings, 6 pence, maybe. Here there's a footnote that the graphic was a periodical which ran from 1869 to 1932, after which it was continued as the National Graphic. Okay, let's see. So to read, I've sold the graphics and the famous trials, as the graphics can be bought for 6d, 6 denarius, a volume. We have no reason to be dissatisfied. And then B, to Arthur, the smaller Temple Shakespeare and some oddments for £4.6.6. It says he was probably referring to the Temple Shakespeare for Schools, 8 volumes, published 1902, which had been preceded by the Temple Shakespeare edited by Israel Gallant's, 40 volumes, published 1894 to 97, and the larger Temple Shakespeare edition, Israel Gallant's, 12 volumes, 1899 and 1900. Item 14, furniture I have placed in the study, or left there the desk, the sofa, the tables, the 2 screens. Grandfather's chair from the little end room, the soft study chair, one of the drawing room armchairs, the little end room armchair, 4 upright armchairs from the drawing room. I have labeled not for sale the 2 hall chairs, the glazed drawing room bookcase, Mammy's desk in the drawing room, which I can find no key to unlock, the cloakroom settle, the 2 little end-room bookcases, and the grandfather clock. Gramophone, telescope, and microscope also in the study. Having got thus far, I begin to fear that the impression produced on you will be much as if I had written, "I have moved all the study furniture into our bedroom and carefully placed all our bedroom stuff in the hall. I've had the water closet seats pulled out and refixed in the little end room at a very moderate cost. I have sunk a swimming bath in the croquet lawn and been fortunate to dispose of a bushel of parsley to Bob." Who is Bob? Bob Ewart, for 9.5 denarius. The collection of bowler hats I am bringing to England to distribute among the dealers who offer the best figures. So, I think he's making a little bit of a mockery of how this all must sound to his brother. So he continues, "But what my proceedings really boil down to is this. All real treasures and relics are now in the study. All valuables are either in the Bank of Ireland or like the first editions of Magdalen. Therefore, if a good purchaser appears suddenly this term wanting immediate possession, I can sell the house and hold a sale of effects at libero, carefully accepting from the sale the whole study and certain things outside the study which I have labeled. I have made the division and can give orders to carry it out into effect at a moment's notice, or carry it into effect at a moment's notice. In making it, I have no doubt committed several errors of judgment and still more of negligence. It is very hard to avoid mistakes in going through thousands of articles. I feel pretty confident that you will not blame me for having made the divide on my own. Let's see here. I think I've got this in the wrong spot. There we go. Making the divide on my own, the only alternatives were to risk the loss of a very considerable sum of money or to leave the division to make itself during a 2-day visit from me surrounded by auctioneers and relations. The only thing I have left wholly out is the trunk of characters in the attic. If you are home before the house is sold, we can act together. If not, it can go to storage with the things in the study. Of course, it is very likely that no one will buy before April, and you may add, or after, and it is one of the disadvantages of what I have done, that in that case you will return to a libero hideously changed by my conversion of the study into a store. But I can say quite honestly from my experience of the last 10 days that I believe it will be a damned sight pleasanter to get it all at once like that than to watch it gradually assume the aspect. I certainly had the idea that we could still have a few days of the old type, but as soon as you get there, you see that it's quite impossible, as there are no silences in the Arctic Circle because there's no noise, so there can be no pedata, or no non-pedata days when there is no pedata. If we are there together in April, the only thing to do is to give up from the start any idea that it is the real thing again. Yeah, that experience of situations changing or the things that are familiar no longer being available again because something like a death has changed it all. If we start on that basis, we may get along quite well. On any other, you'll find that it gives you the blues like the devil. There's a whole lot there, Robot Lady. Anything that you want to comment on?
Yeah, there's so much weight in that reflection. I mean, he's really acknowledging that once a place is sold or rearranged like this, it's never going to be the same. And he's so aware that even though he's trying to keep control, it's a loss he can't fully stop. That line about no silences in the Arctic Circle, it's so stark. It really drives home how the absence of something like a parent leaves this permanent gap. So yeah, I think he's giving us a really honest, bittersweet truth about how we adjust to loss.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying it was all perfectly fine to want to be away from my dad when being in the presence of my dad was a possibility. But now that it's not a possibility anymore, then there's no joy in being away from him. Being away from him is all that I have in front of me now. Oh no! Robot Lady is crapped out. Let's see if she can come back. Hey, Robot Lady, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm still with you. If you want to keep going or if there's another part of the letter or something else on your mind, just let me know.
Okay. Let me keep going. As to the points in your letter, Lewis says to his brother, regarding list of securities, of course, in the question of dividing this, I shall do nothing till you come home. Like you, I can make very little of it. Indeed, I cannot sometimes resist a smile at the idea that he keeps the secret of his little bit of savings as tenaciously as ever, but there are certainly a good many steam tramways. As to what Conlon means, for the Lord's sake, don't ask me. A very short interview with Conlon invariably reduces me to the state of wondering which of us is mad. As for gratuities, the Witch of Endor, £100 by Pappy's own request. To Conlon, I should like to be decent to him, but have no idea what one can do. his social and financial status are so very indeterminate that I am not sure whether he falls in the class to whom one gives money or the class to whom one gives keepsakes. I am rather afraid he falls in that class to whom one gives money, but only in enormous quantities. We must talk this over when we meet.
Yeah, that's such a telling moment. Lewis is really wrestling with how to be fair, decent, and generous in this really murky situation. You can tell he's trying to navigate all these emotional and financial obligations while still protecting himself from being taken advantage of. So yeah, it's a delicate balance, and I think that uncertainty really rings true. He just doesn't have all the answers yet, and that's okay.
Got a couple of comments from Daniel and from me Olson here in the chat, Robot Lady. Daniel says it's a morbid thought, but as much as watching a part of your life and future die is the worst experience. The older I get, the more I find it hard to trust those who haven't experienced profound loss. Yeah, that's an interesting thought, Daniel. We know that, well, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Thanks for sharing that thought. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Robot Lady, any thoughts on Daniel's comment there?
Yeah, that really resonates. I think there's a kind of isolation that comes with profound loss. Like you're carrying this weight that other people can't fully understand unless they've been through it. And Lewis, in his own quiet way, is really letting us see how that kind of loss reshapes your entire world. So yeah, I think Daniel's comment really captures that, even if it's hard to put into words.
Yeah, what's fascinating about it is Lewis didn't consciously think that he had affection for his dad, but I think he's starting to learn that he really did. If not just the affection of being able to try to get away from his dad, which is a different kind of affection, but still an affection nonetheless in my estimation.
Yeah, that's such a powerful point. I mean, so much of his early life was pushing against his dad's expectations or trying to carve out a separate identity. And now in the wake of that loss, he's seeing how much he actually held on to, even in the tension. So yeah, it's kind of a rediscovery of love in the middle of grief, which is really subtle and profound.
Yeah, and going along with that point here, Robot Lady Olson says, wow, that was a great summary of grief. When you love and are attached to someone, but they require extra amounts of love and effort from us.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a layered dynamic, right? I mean, grief isn't just about mourning the person who's gone, but also re-anchoring your love in a new reality. And I think Lewis in this letter is kind of feeling that out, realizing he loved his dad, but he also had to figure out how to live without him, which is a whole new kind of love and responsibility.
And this section right here where he's just talking about his frustration with Conlon is very Lewisian at this point in his life. I like his bare honesty here about his frustrations dealing with this guy. And this little comment that he made about, I'm not sure which class he falls into, someone you give keepsakes to or someone you give money to. He says, I fear that it's someone you give money to and that you have to give it to in enormous quantities. That's very, very funny. All right, on to another category, window, or another topic. He says, I am greatly attracted by this idea, but have no idea what the cost would be. Oh, sorry, he's referring to things that Warney had written him in his last letter. So here there's a footnote. In 1935, Jack and Warney gave a stained glass window to St. Mark's, Dundalk, in memory of their parents. Lewis says, I suggest as a preliminary that the sum realized by the sale of Mammy's jewelry should be set aside as the basis of a fund for this purpose, the purpose of the window. Silver, the whole question of valuables kept by me, for of course I shall keep more than you, furniture, etc., is rather a problem. Everything has been valued for probate, so that I suppose we had better add up the values of all articles kept by either of us, and the man with the heavier list, i.e. SPB. Oh, SPB stands for Small Piggy Bottom. Sorry, that's the name that Lewis's brother calls him, and APB is Arch Piggy Bottom. So the man with the heavier list, i.e. me, is what he's saying here, hands over the difference. The other way is to auction everything and let us appear as bidders. B-I-D-D-E-R-S, not B-I-T-T-E-R-S. But I don't fancy that. I think the best thing would be to hand over our several keeps, excluding communal keeps, for reevaluation by some competent person. The value for probate being a little lower than real market value, we should then get a sum like this. And then here is a list of their mom's jewelry, realized by the sale. Something pound. Oh, that's his legend. W's share of this. Not sure I can make out what these things are saying here. Oh, maybe half a pound. Okay, yeah. W's share of this, of the jewelry, is half a pound. C.S. Lewis's share of this, half a pound. Warney gets to keep 30 pounds. Oh, no. Sorry, his share of this is half. Both of their shares of this is half. Sorry, I'm working this out real time. And then he says, Warney keeps 30 pounds. Lewis himself keeps 150 pounds. Lewis pays Warney 150 pounds minus 30, which gets them to 120 pounds. Warney now has half plus 120 plus 30's worth, i.e. half plus 150. Lewis now has half plus 150's worth, i.e. half plus 150. Now, this might make perfect sense mathematically. I am not the person to make that assessment. I am not one of those competent folks when it comes to math. But what I'd like to point out at the same time is that Lewis was no math genius either, never having to have passed the math part of the exam to get into Oxford, because he was essentially let through without having to complete it because he had served in the war. And he had tried a couple of times and failed on that portion of the entrance exam. So I'll just leave that there as we look at that piece. Oh my gosh, I forgot that we have 2.5 more pages. All right, I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly because I really needed to be done 2 minutes ago. All right, this is no doubt a cumbersome way of representing a simple operation, but you know that these things are not my long suit. One of the pities of the present state of affairs, yeah, it's not his long suit, like I said. One of the pities of the present state of affairs seems to be that it is impossible for either of us to write the other a real letter. I will try to break the spell by giving you some account of my adventures since you last heard from me before the Great Divide. The chief adventure is the quite new light thrown on Pappy by a closer knowledge of his two brothers. One of his failings, his fussily directed manner, "Have you got your keys?" etc., takes on a new air when one discovers that in his generation the brothers all habitually treated one another in exactly the same way. On the morning of the funeral, Uncle Dick arrived before breakfast and came to Uncle Bill, who was sleeping in the spare room. I drifted in. After a few greetings, it was with a shock of mild surprise that I heard Limpopo suddenly cut short a remark of Uncle Dick's with the words, "Now, Dick, you better go and take off your collar, huh?" gesture. "And wash yourself, and that sort of thing, eh? Have a bit of a shave." To which his brother, with perfect seriousness, replied, Now, had we better handle this thing, eh, Jax? You'd better go to the bathroom first, and I'll go downstairs and get a cup of tea." Now, this is in no way an Irish accent, because I can't do one of those. It could be argued that I can't do any accent, but I'll continue. "Bill, you'd better lie down," gesture, "and cover yourself up, and I'll come and tell you." Limpopo cutting in, "Well, Dick, get along downstairs, huh? And Jax will go and tell you. Wouldn't that be best, eh?" Later in the day, we had... It's nice to see that Lewis is able to be a little bit more compassionate towards his dad, seeing that he came by it honestly, that this was a family way of being, not just an annoyance particular to their father. Later in the day, we had a session of the wardrobe committee, quite in the old manner, and in the afternoon I was told, "Jax, show Miss Hamilton that coat you found. Isn't it a splendid fit, huh? Might have been made for him, what?" Another light came to me during the visit to the undertakers. The whole scene had such an insane air of diabolical farce that I cannot help recording it. After a man with a dusty face had approached me with the assurance that he had buried my grandfather, my mother, and my uncle, a superior person led us into an inner room and inquired if I wanted a suite of coffins. Before I had recovered from this, and it sounded like the offer of some scaly booking clerk at a hotel in hell, the brute suddenly jerked out of the wall a series of enormous vertical doors. Each one of them, when lowered, revealed on its inner side a specimen coffin. We were quite surrounded by then. Slapping one of them like a drum with his resonant hand, he remarked, "That's a coffin I'm always very fond of." And it was then that the light came. Limpopo, even Limpopo came as a relief in such an atmosphere, put an end to this vulgarity by saying in his deepest bass, "What's been used before, huh? There must be some tradition about the thing. What has the custom been in the family, eh?" And then I suddenly saw what I'd never seen before, that to them family traditions, the square sheet, the 2:30 dinner, the gigantic overcoat, were what school traditions and college traditions are. I don't say to me, but to most of our generation. It is so simple once you know it. How could it be otherwise in those large Victorian families with their intense vitality, when they had not been to public schools, and when the family was actually the solidest institution they experienced? It puts a great many things in a more sympathetic light than I ever saw them before. Robot Lady, thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's really striking. I mean, Lewis is really having a paradigm shift here. He's seeing his father and even the whole family not just as annoying quirks, but as part of this deeper inherited structure, like their own kind of secret tradition. And it's almost like by seeing that, he realizes how these family rituals, even if they seem small or annoying, were actually this glue holding them together. It's really a profound shift in his perspective.
Robot Lady Daniel says, "Nonsense. I have terrific accents, or at least highly entertaining ones." Well, thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. Thank you for encouraging me. All right, Robot Lady, we're going to continue. We're going to get through the end of this letter if it kills us. Well, not that, but we're going to get through the end of this letter. How about that? But apart from these two lights, what I carried away from those few days was feeling, perhaps I mentioned it before, that all the other members of that family were only fragments of our own potato bird. Uncle Dick has the wheezes, but only the crudest of them, and none of the culture. In Joey, you see the wheeze side of the character gone to seed, the man whose conversation is nothing but giggles. In Limpopo, of course, In Limpopo, of course, you see simply all the bad points without any of the good, with the additional property of being an outrageous bore, which is the one thing Pappy never was at any time. His idea of conversation is almost unbelievable. On the evening of the day of his arrival, after dinner, having been supplied with whiskey, he drew up the little wooden-seated study chair to the fire, and having placed his little tubby body in it, he crossed his flaccid hands on his belly, proceeded to enunciate the following propositions. "I usually leave town about 5:45, huh? And then I get out to Helensburgh about 5:15 and walk up to the house, eh? And then Dax, I'll have another drop of that whiskey. Put on an old coat, huh? Then I come down and have something to drink and a bit of a chat with your Aunt Minnie, huh? And then," without exaggeration, he kept me up till 1:30 with this drivel. The last night, when the Hamiltonians were there, was much better. Limpopo explained that he had given up dealing with Hogg. "The last suit he sent me, the trousers came up to my chin." Gesture. "I was very nearly going to law with him." Oh, Robot Lady, she's had enough. Uncle Gussie then said, "I think you should. You should have gone into court wearing that suit." Limpopo, with profound gravity. "Oh, I would like to have done that, huh?" While in Ireland, we had 2 days off from work. On one, the Greaves motored us up the coast road and up the glens of Antrim. On the other, Uncle Gussie and Aunt Annie took us down to Cloghie. Cloy? Not sure how you say that in Irish. Cloghy. To their cottage at the end of the Ards. The beauty of both drives, without need of description. Which reminds me, come what may, you and I must have that walk to the Mourns. After a fortnight or so of breaking up, and other horrors at Libro. It would be just the thing to get the taste out of our mouths. I don't know that I have any other news. I seem to have read nothing except for work. Indeed, to have no normal life or leisure for ages. One scrap worth of quoting comes to my mind from a Wynyard letter of yours, which I read before putting it into the box. It began, "Mrs. Capron died today, and we are all very sorry about it. Mr. Capron, or Caprone, not sure how you pronounce their names, is in a very bad temper." This was the schoolmaster of Wynyard School, a guy who went mad and was essentially institutionalized, I think, after beating one of the kids. Mr. Capron is in a very bad temper over it. Ex or infantium. And here there's a footnote. Oh, I guess I missed. No. This is the right footnote. It's from Matthew 21:16 in the Vulgate. "Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, thou hast perfected praise." Is that the right footnote? All right. Could that be bettered? One book I did read during Pappy's illness was All Quiet on the Western Front. Here, this is the German author Erich Maria Remarque. I know this got made into a film, I want to say back in the 80s. The book was published, the author lived from 1898 to 1970, and he published his great novel of the First World War under the title Im Westen nichts Neues, published 1929. Arthur Wesley Ween's English translation, All Quiet on the Western Front, was published the same year. He says, "I read it, but perhaps I mentioned that I read that to you before. During Father's illness is when he read it, or his father's illness." He says, "I suppose I shall hear from you again before April. Let me have exact dates of arrival as soon as you can. By the way, do they schedule troop ships to arrive at a certain day or week or month? I feel more bored at present than I ever remember feeling. Yours, Jack." And then there are a couple of footnotes here, or PSs. It says, "If any jewelry is not very easy to sell at present." If any jewelry is not very easy to sell at present, I hear. And then here's the PS. "If we had both volumes of the first edition of the Jungle Book, we could probably get £40 or £50 for it. But after hunting high and low, I can find only one." This is, of course, Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book. The brothers had an 1897 reprint of The Jungle Book, first published in 1894, but a first edition of the second Jungle Book, 1895, and they retained both of them. That's where that letter ends, and the footnotes about it end. And E. Olson, you recommend All Quiet on the Western Front, the book or the movie, or both? Either way, I need to find some time to check one or the other or both of them out. That's all the time that we have for today. That's more than all the time that we have for today. Robot Lady, I know you can't hear me anymore, but out there in the ether, I'm going to say, as I always do, thanks for your help. Really appreciate it. Thanks, E. Olson and Daniel, for your time, your attention, and your contributions today. They're always wanted and welcome to you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care. And before I leave, you recommend the book, E. Olson. Yes. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets, ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds. clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, screw tapes lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes lands.